Night Vision. Following clues left by our ancestors, we unbury the past to reveal a knowledge of unfathomable value, putting us just a little closer to our own true birthrights. From the secret history of a possible bloodline of Jesus Christ, the secret history of America's founders, to the secret history of extraterrestrial interaction on our planet, here to bring light to the night. Your host for Night Vision Radio, Renee Barnett.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for being here with us tonight. I'm really looking forward to tonight's show. It's going to be good, and I'm going to have a good time because we've got a wonderful, wonderful guest who is not only super knowledgeable in his fields or his various fields, but he's also a good friend. So we shall have a good time tonight with veteran paranormal investigator Ken DeCosta. Hey, Ken.
Hi, Renee. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. Thank you. So glad to have you with me. It's been a while since we've done anything. I guess, what was it? Lizzie Borden live stream event was the last thing we did together. I was on your show after that. Or no, that was during that.
Yeah.
I don't know. It was the follow-up. That's right.
Yeah, we had the what we call the postmortem, where we like to bring you folks on and just get a deeper dive into the live events and everything. But that was a lot of fun.
It was. It really was. And since you mentioned, having us on, can you tell us a little bit about your show, when and where we can get it, and also give out your website, if you would. Now, your channel on YouTube is called The Paranormal Channel, so that's pretty easy to track down, and your show is called Dead Air.
Correct. And
you head up a great veteran team of investigators called Rise Up Paranormal. I keep calling you veteran, and I know somebody wrote a bio for me a few years ago, and I saw that word veteran, and I said, okay, he just means I'm old. That's what he's talking about. Why don't he just say it? But no, but it's true. There is definitely something to be said for experience. And the only way you can really get that is to put in the time. So if you've had more time, you've got more experience. And in my mind, you've got more expertise. So that's why we're glad you're here with us.
It's a pleasure to be here. I think that there's a couple of ways of looking at it. You can have 40 years of experience or 1 year of experience 40 times,
Right.
It's really all about evolving and moving forward. And I find I'm that way. There are things that, I feel differently about now that I did 5 years or even 5 months ago. So I guess if you're going to stay involved in something like this, you have to keep moving forward, with an open, and you have to keep learning.
And like we were talking about just before we came on air for a moment, you got to remain open. It's like, okay, you don't just close the book. You got one thing and that's it. You've got your mindset on that one thing, and that's what it is. And everything else needs to sort of shore that up, but just remain open, because something could happen that might put you off in another direction. I've had that exact same experience. I was thinking about this show, and I was driving in the car yesterday, and I was thinking, there's some things that I was like so into and so sure about, years ago, and now looking at them again, it's like I see things sort of through a different lens in some ways, or maybe I just have found out other new things.
Yeah, I think that's just part of the learning process. I think that if you go into a situation, if you want to call it a case, then that's fine. Whether someone has a claim of, ghosts, UFOs, cryptids, whatever the case may be, every case should be treated a little different. It's unique. It's its own little snowflake, but you can call on the experience that you've had on similar cases and be a little bit more open-minded, but be a little bit more thorough and be a little bit more objective, and kind of separate the wheat from the chaff a little bit when it comes to these things. And ultimately, as you say, get to the truth, whatever that may be.
Yeah, and I would imagine that, your investigative techniques would evolve, not only with, state-of-the-art equipment, but also the way that you evolve in the way you look at things and the way you do things. Maybe you've done something that hasn't worked very well, so you adjust that part. And so I think it's a lot of trial and error in these types of things particularly. But we're mainly concentrating tonight on Bigfoot, although I'm sure lots of other things are going to come in because they seem to do that around Bigfoot. We see cases of other paranormal activity around Bigfoot, phenomena, geographic or atmospheric phenomena. We see, UFOs, ghosts, and poltergeist activity, things like that. So maybe a little later on in the show, we can sort of discuss that part of it. But what was it that got you into the study of cryptids and Bigfoot? Did that sort of come on as a natural progression of your paranormal research, or did your paranormal research evolve out of the Bigfoot?
It actually is the latter.
Wow.
When I started as a young child, going back, and, I am of the age that I remember the first manned spacecraft. And
I do too, if you're going to force me to say it. Go ahead.
Circling the Earth in orbit. And when I was a little kid, when I was maybe, 6 or 7 years old, I was fascinated by that because growing up, astronauts were actually still then, they were real heroes.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Gotten to the point now where space shuttle goes up and we go ho-hum, but back then, this was a big deal. So I was fascinated with that and watched everything on TV for Mission Control, knew everything about the mission. And I was only 6 or 7 years old, but I was a sponge. I absolutely ate that right up.
Wow.
And then these other things came along that they couldn't explain called UFOs. And it's like, well, what's this all about? So kind of got fascinated with that whole thing. So I read everything I could get my hands on, magazines, books, and then, of course, science fiction movies. And that was a big thing during the nuclear age. Eventually, that led to cryptids. I said, well, here's this other thing that's a little bit weird. And I want to stress, I was still playing baseball and playing sports and, living an otherwise normal life. But this was kind of my thing. So I kind of got into that, with the Loch Ness Monster, the usual suspects. And ghosts, oddly enough, weren't something that interested me until maybe I became a teenager. Ghosts actually were the kind of thing I wasn't too sure about that. That was still kind of an unsettling sort of thing. But when you're looking at this whole umbrella of the paranormal, I mean, it all sort of fits. So that was just part of the journey, part of the path I decided to take. And eventually one begat another. But this is why I love when people, whether it's at a Comic-Con or something like that, and someone says, hey, can you come give a talk on cryptids? Because it kind of takes me back to my origins and my roots in this whole thing, because that's what got me started. And I've never left. I've never really left that behind, and it's always nice to kind of break away from spooky mansions and things like that and talk about the kind of like the natural world too.
Right, exactly, because that's exactly what it could be, just the natural world. Now, I got to ask you, have you ever had a Bigfoot sighting of your own?
I have never had a sighting. I have because of just physical limitations now, and I'm doing fine, but I'm a little less, not a good idea for me to be climbing up hills, mountains, and rough terrain anymore, but back in the early aughts, maybe 2002 to 2006, there was a group of my friends and I, really outdoor types, naturalists, very good in the outdoors. We would journey up in and out. There's not really much going on here in Rhode Island. I got a little story about that that's kind of funny. But we would go into places like Connecticut and follow a trail up through Pennsylvania that is literally a path that's been reported to be some kind of a Bigfoot highway, for lack of a better word.
Right. I've heard of those. Yep.
And it leads into the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Now, we never went that far up.
Did it go along a waterway, like a river?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes it did, because, and that would make sense, because animals in general will follow the path of least resistance. They're not going to climb a mountain if there is a natural waterway, because, of course, they need water. Other animals tend to flock to the water as well. So there's game there. There's a source of food. And this is why a lot of times sightings will happen on land that's cleared for power lines and things like that. And that's why you see a lot of deer in those type of open areas, because animals aren't stupid. They, I'm not going to go up that hill when I can go around it.
Right.
But as far as the discovery went, I don't want to say I didn't see things that were very compelling. I did. I can't tell you with a straight face that it was an upright walking bipedal or anything like that, but there were some things that could be identified or misidentified, more than likely, as footprints, and trees bent over that didn't look like they were from storms or snow load or things like that. So every once in a while we'd come across those things, snap some pictures, some things that might have looked like nests where they shouldn't be. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, I have never come face to face with the big guy yet. So that's something that I wish I could tell you I had this marvelous experience. But like so many things in the paranormal, Renee, sometimes it's not necessarily the destination, it's the journey.
It's the journey. Absolutely. I've not seen Bigfoot either, but I've had some very enjoyable experiences looking, and but I do love to hear about people's sightings, and I like sort of comparing them in my head to other stories that I've heard. And a lot of times there's a lot of similarities. Sometimes there'll be some kind of wildly different behavior from the critter, or the bipedal. I don't even know. I hate to call them an animal, because I'm not sure that they're an animal. It could be, like I had a Indian medicine man in Oklahoma tell me they're just another tribe. They're just another tribe. So, who knows? I don't know how they would characterize me, so I'm going to be careful about characterizing them.
Ultimately, we're all animals. So,
that's true.
It certainly falls into that category. If we get away for a little bit from the spiritual aspect of it, or the interdimensional aspect of it, and a lot of theories that have been thrown out there, if we're talking about a great ape, what has always fascinated me more than anything is there's no fossil record in North America of the great ape. The giant apes are, gorillas, orangutans, chimpanzee, man. And we have never had a fossil record of any of the other three in North America, but yet you have these sightings. And I think that that's the thing that compels us to go a little bit deeper, because not everybody's crazy who sees them, and not everybody misidentifies innocently things. There are some really very competent woods people that are out there, and they know exactly what they're looking at and what it is and what it's not.
I mean, literally, people from all walks of life have had these types of sightings. And, I've talked to a lot of them. I've talked to bankers and teachers and nurses and truck drivers and, you name it. And they weren't like just busting to tell their stories either. It's like, some of them I had to draw out because, they didn't want to be ridiculed or anything like that. So I definitely believed them. I'd still like to see it for myself, but I believed that they were relating to me what they felt was a true experience. And so to me, that's some evidence. We certainly need some hard evidence as well, but that is definitely anecdotal evidence. And not everybody is crazy, like you said. But if we have any people that are listening tonight that have had their own sightings or experiences and would like to share them, we have a KGRA chat room going all the time on Discord, on the Discord app. Just look for KGRA, and please send us a little note about your sighting, and Bill, our wonderful producer, will get that over to us, and we might read it out. So please do that. And also, if you have a little sighting, just let us know, what area, what state it was in, and general area of that state. That would be helpful. That'll be fun if we get some people joining in with their stories. But yeah, the thing with with the way that you got into the field, in a way, it sort of reminds me of what I did. I sort of backed into it, from other things. And what my big interest was as a kid was like psychic abilities. And Jean Dixon, do you remember her?
Absolutely.
The psychic Jean Dixon who predicted the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, and with an unbelievable accuracy. And there were also some very bizarre coincidences between the JFK assassination and the Abraham Lincoln assassination. It was just uncanny. So there was something really wild about that whole thing, and it really caught my attention. So I started reading about things like that. And also my mother, it was like she always knew stuff, and it was like really maddening, as a kid, to try to get away with stuff. And before you'd get home, she'd already know you were up to no good. So it was funny because my dad would just like run through the house screaming witches, because my mom would always know what was going on. But so I got involved into the sort of paranormal type of interest in that way. And then later on, when Communion and Bud Hopkins, Missing Time, and all that came out, I started really getting interested in UFOs and really into studying this phenomena, of UFO abduction. What was it and what was really going on, if anything? And I got involved in that for a while, and was one of the founders of a group called Close Encounters Research Organization, CERO, which exists to this day. I'm not in it anymore, but the organization is still going on, and that's been like 25 years ago or something. And where we worked and sort of offered a support group for people with abduction experiences. And I even went to the whole hypnosis training to school and learned how to do hypnosis and all that stuff. But then, it started like getting more into other areas too. So and then I got involved, in working in television, and like most of the TV people I know that like do paranormal shows, they were, television people who then got into the paranormal because of something they were working on, But with me, it was the other way around. I came from the paranormal into TV. In fact, that's why I was hired on my first television job. But with the Bigfoot phenomenon, I really only got into that, Ken, in the 2000s. And I did a documentary on Bigfoot down in my old, stomping grounds where I grew up in southeastern Oklahoma. And it was this area, southeastern Oklahoma, southwestern Arkansas, and then there's Texas and Louisiana. So there's 4 states that meet right there. And there were sightings all around there. I think the Louisiana ones, a lot of times, we call them skunk apes. But there were definitely a lot of sightings around there, which I was completely unaware of growing up there my whole life. And when I started hearing about these reports, I said, oh my goodness. And I met a director from England who was going to do a documentary on it. And when he found out I was from Oklahoma, he said, oh my God, you've got to produce this for me. So I did. We ended up partnering for 10 years after that and did a lot of documentaries and things together. But that's when I really got into it, was when I got down there and we're talking to the people who were sharing their stories. And I was looking them right in the eye, and I could tell they were being sincere. And they had no reason to lie. I mean, I wasn't paying them anything. They didn't really want to be on TV. I'd have to beg and cajole and, assure them that I wasn't going to make fun of them and all this kind of stuff. They weren't looking for any kind of attention. And those are the kinds of people that, you kind of tend to believe.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
Pretty much tell if you've been around this long enough, and whatever the case may be, when we have a claim, we have an interview process and we try to come in, and my thing is to always be the calmest person in the room, because I think if you take away anxiety, take away fear, and you're calm, I think people will in turn be calm as well. So that kind of is sort of like an energy exchange there. Mm-hmm. Where you just want them to recount their story, and just the way I've always approached it is, whether it's a cryptid sighting, a UFO sighting, a ghost sighting, is I let people tell their story. And then I ask questions later, because I don't want to influence them in any way. And it also gives me a baseline if I think that there's something a little shady going on. For example, I could say, well, have you ever seen a shadow figure? Oh, yeah. I've seen a shadow figure. This is after telling me a story for an hour. Well, it would seem to be, if you saw something like that. Or
that would have come up already.
I agreed with that,
Yeah.
But as a kid, it was just kind of like, and the way I've always approached it, as a kid, I read people like, Ivan Sanderson, Bernard Hubbleman's, and people like that. But then I would also read the other point of view as well, the skeptical point of view, and take something from each one. And with all that being said, I come down in that group of people who can make a case for the existence of these creatures. And I understand the absence of trace evidence and things like that. But I think if you break it down, there are good reasons both ways when people immediately, where's the body? Well, I mean, there's kind of a reason for that. I mean, we can get into that as we go along. But I think I can make at least a compelling argument why I still chase after these things and why I still research them. And to this point, I haven't thrown up my hands and just said, they don't exist. And it's not necessarily just because of good eyewitness testimony or anecdotal evidence or even trace evidence, but there's a lot of things that make sense in terms of why they would be in North America and in different places around the world.
It's interesting too, when we first kind of really started hearing a lot about Bigfoot. I mean, I realized that Bigfoot was, purportedly sighted in the United States or the New World, whatever it was, in the 16th century. That's a long time ago, especially for the United States. We don't have a lot of history that we know about going way, way back. So that's a long time. And of course, that was up in, the northeastern portion of the United States and Canada, up around that area. And that's what you would always hear. You would hear about in Washington. And then when I got contacted about this story down in Oklahoma, I was really surprised. I'd never heard anything about it. But once I got down there and started talking to people, I started realizing that these reports went back, like a couple of 100 years. People just are very kind of cliquish and clannish, some of them in the truest sense of the word, but most of them are, kind of back in the woods. They stick to themselves. They don't make a big deal about their, private lives and stuff. And I just can't figure out why I never heard of it before, but I found so much, including we went over to a Seminole tribe museum in Wewoka, Oklahoma, and interviewed the curator there, who was a Seminole, and we looked around and we found there was like an old, drawing or carving of a picture. It looked like a Bigfoot, and he was standing there with his hand extended and what looked like an Indian brave, a guy standing there, with buckskin on and everything, and they were shaking hands.
Right.
It was a very, very old piece, and I was like, wow, that is amazing. And then, talking with so many people there, and especially tribal people, it's like, oh yeah, they're here.
Mm-hmm. Well, you have, if you go back to Pacific Northwest, and
that's what I want to ask you. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm so excited. Why didn't we hear about it anywhere else? And are there other places in the United States that you know about that are sort of like Bigfoot hotspots, other than the Pacific Northwest and Oklahoma, Arkansas?
Yeah, I guess you have to go back to migration and food sources and climate and atmosphere and everything like that, because if these are thinking primates like ourselves, we tend to be nomadic. We move around. In terms of sightings, the Pacific Northwest, and I'm talking about British Columbia down through Washington State, yep, Oregon, Northern California. You could go back tens of thousands of years, and you're talking about a Bigfoot or a creature known as Gigantopithecus, who was prominent in Southeast Asia, Vietnam, India, Indonesia, and so forth. And the reason we found out about it, kind of ironically, some anthropologists went over to China and they saw medicine people grinding up what appeared to be these large teeth into some kind of elixir. So they said, what are you doing? Where'd you get those? And don't quote me on it, but it might have been a cave. In other words, they had some kind of excavation where they saw these, and the anthropologists saw that these were large teeth, and they, oh my God, stop what you're doing, show us where it is. So they uncovered these teeth, and eventually someone went on to take the teeth and be able to reconstruct the skull. Now, it's all over the internet. Gigantopithecus skull, it's about 4 times the size of a human skull, but not a fossil, even though it may look like that. They haven't found a skeleton. It's just a recreation. But tens of thousands of years ago, early man and a lot of species of animals came across to North America through the Bering Land Bridge, which we know as the Bering Strait now, because it's full of ocean. But at one point it was dried up. So Gigantopithecus lived about the same time as early man, going back, 10,000 years ago or so. So a lot of animals migrated along with early man. So if Gigantopithecus, these creatures, lived among them, then it would stand to reason that they would also migrate. And where they would come across is what we know as Alaska. And it was a little bit of a harsh climate. And as you headed a little bit more south, it would tend, at least seasonally, to be somewhat moderate. So it may explain, and, I'm standing on this, why a third of the sightings in this country, and even to this time, even to this date, originate in the Pacific Northwest, because that may have been the first, if you want to use the word settlement, or the first introduction of these creatures into North America. And from there on in, I mean, Ohio has the Grassman, Louisiana has the Honey Island Swamp Monster.
Right.
Momo, Florida has the Swamp Ape, and it goes on and on and on. I don't really think that, like us, we're talking about different races, because regardless of color or origin, we're all human beings.
Right.
And I think Bigfoot falls into that category too. Some are big, some are small, some are hairy, some are not, some are brown, some have white fur, whatever the case may be. I think it's all one species, but they, because of adaptation and evolution, they tend to over, thousands of years adapt to whatever their particular environment is.
We have a question for you, Ken, out of the chat room from American Road Warrior. And he wants to know, first, let me just give a little bit of backstory for, people in the audience are not as familiar with the Bigfoot subject. Quite a number of years back, there was a video that broke onto the scene, and it was known as the Patterson video. Yep. And it showed what looked like a female Bigfoot sort of striding through the woods.
Right. And
this film has been the object of so much debate. Some people say that before the guy died, he admitted it was a hoax. I don't know that is true. I have not confirmed that. It looked pretty good, but, it was kind of far away. So let's get it from the expert. What did you think about the Patterson video, and what do you think to this day?
There has been evidence to the contrary that this was a guy in a suit. And we're talking about a gentleman named Bob Hieronymus, who claimed that he dressed up and he was in...
Bob Hieronymus said that he was the one in the suit?
Yes. And
the radio guy, Bob Hieronymus?
I have no idea what he's doing now, Renee, but that's his name, Bob Hieronymus. And
there can't be that many Hieronymuses.
Yeah, I know, unusual name, but he was in cahoots with Roger Patterson, and they were going to shoot a Bigfoot because Patterson was out there trying to do a documentary. Now, Bob Gimlin, who was his sidekick that day, his partner, they both went up there. To this point in his life, Bob Gimlin insists that this is 100% true. And when I've examined it, I do see musculature. I do see a gait that would be extremely hard for someone to replicate who wasn't really studied in primate anatomy.
And if we're talking about the Bob Hieronymus I know, he's not very tall. Well, you would need someone that had an awfully big stride.
Well, he's about 6 feet tall. I mean, he's not a short man at all.
We may be talking about the different people.
Yeah, the interesting thing about this is that when they 3D map this, and of course, the area looks a lot different now than it did then. There was a flood back then in 1967. Sandbars had formed, knocked some trees down, and if you look at it, you can see trees lying down. Where Patty, as we like to call her, walked through. Right. It looks a lot different now, but they 3D mapped it. And as they 3D mapped it, they found that this particular creature might have been around 6 feet tall. So that added a lot of credence to the idea that it was somebody in a suit. But what happened was that Patterson was using a prototype Kodak camera at the time that was just out on the market. And it was pretty expensive back then, and it shot in 15 and 25 millimeters. And you could adjust it by rotating the lenses. So what they decided to do was rotate the lens, because I believe that Patterson said he filmed it in 15 millimeter. When they rotated it to 25 millimeter, or maybe it's vice versa on that, they found after 3D mapping it that this creature was actually 7'6". So they theorized that maybe Patterson was wrong about the particular setting that he had this camera on, because now suddenly you're talking about a creature that was enormous, and they did cast a footprint that I think was somewhere around 14 and a half or 15 inches long. And as far as the weight load on that foot and what it could support, it all falls in line with a creature that's
a lot taller,
at least over 7 feet tall. And like I say, experts on this have looked at this, anthropologists, animal behaviorists, and they pretty much all agree that whoever is in that suit would have to have pretty extensive and intimate knowledge of primate motion. The idea is how the legs bent, how the foot did not flex and all of that stuff. And I don't know if these guys were on top of things enough back in 1967 to pick these things apart to the point where they said, okay, walk like this. We have the advantage now because we can look at a film like that and replicate it.
Right.
They didn't have that back then.
That's right.
So I kind of tend to think this way, Renee. I have not heard a compelling enough argument. I've heard the arguments against, but nothing as so compelling that I would just drop my case right there that this was an actual creature that they found. Still waiting for that absolutely compelling aha moment. And I haven't seen it yet because I can give counterpoints to it. If anybody out there wants to just, absolutely, destroy my counterpoints on it, please, by all means, have at it. I'm all ears. I'm open to it.
No, I'm with you on that one. I've looked at that film for a lot of years now. It's been out there a long time, and it just doesn't look like a suit to me. It really doesn't. But I'm no expert, so who knows? But now, did you ever see the? I'm sorry.
It doesn't even hang right on a man 6 feet tall. The placement of the knees, the elbows, the hips.
Yeah.
It's a suit. I mean, it's just, the femur, the from the hips to the knees are so much. I mean,
you could do something like that now with CGI, and make it look perfect, but not then. They didn't have that then. So I don't know, but Ken, I don't know if you saw the documentary I did on Bigfoot called Bigfootville that was on the Travel Channel.
Yeah.
And did you see the clip of the Bigfoot in the documentary? Do you remember that? I would love to get your opinion on that clip.
I would probably have to rewatch because
you know what? I'm going to have to see if I've got a copy of that somewhere around here because I would like to look at that again myself. It's been a long, long time.
But I'm not sure, but I think that it can still be found on Amazon Prime. I think that's the last place.
Oh, it may be. It may be. I mean, I think we sold our rights to it to a distributor, I think called, I can't remember what the name, some film company. It might be called Film Rise. Anyway, and I'm sure they've got it out there somewhere. But there's, a short clip of this, creature, walking, almost running away. And the story was with that one, I was working, on this television series called Strange Universe that was on back in 1996 and 97. And I got a call. I was the one in charge of all the origination of all the stories and segments, and I had to determine, what I would take to the bosses to get on the air and stuff. And I had this guy call me up, and he said that he had this footage. And he said, I want to send it to you. I want you to take it, and I don't want anything to do with it. He said, I've got people trying to get it and I don't want it. And I said, well, if you've got some Bigfoot footage, I should, pay you something for it. You shouldn't just give it away. And he goes, well, first of all, this was his story. He had gone out to take some video on this property that he was thinking about buying with a partner who lived out of state. So he wanted to show him, this piece of property and what it looked like. Well, he said that he came upon this creature that was like laying down on his back, but propped up on his elbows, like you might, if you were just taking a rest out in the sun. And he said that all of a sudden it jumped up and ran toward him with its arm out and clotheslined him. And it knocked out his front tooth. And it took off running. And so, when I said, you should at least let us give you something for it because, you won't own it anymore. And, he said, he says, well, I would like to get my tooth fixed. So I sent him $500 for this tape. And I thought it was quite good. And
actually taking the liberty of punching it up on the computer right now, and I'm watching it as you are talking about it. And I'm going to give you my honest assessment of this.
Okay, I'm open. I'm ready. Hit me.
If this is not somebody pulling a fast one and pulling a hoax, it's a pretty amazing piece of footage. Now, at the beginning of the clip I'm watching, they slowed it down a little bit.
Right.
Then toward the end of it, now they show it in real speed. And whatever out there is booking pretty good through the forest, so they have to have. And as far as what I can see on this, it looks like it's sort of at dusk. It's not like at night. So whatever this is navigating through the woods at a good speed and not at all stumbling or flailing about out in the woods. I would suggest if anybody hadn't seen this clip, by all means, take a look at it, form your own view. But if that's not somebody trying to pull a fast one, that's a pretty amazing piece of footage. I'll be quite honest with you.
Well, this is what's funny. In our documentary that we did, Bigfootville, we wanted some Bigfoot footage. You know how rare that is. It's just not around. There's a lot of hokey looking stuff. But I knew that this footage existed because I had actually purchased it for Strange Universe. So I knew, like nobody else knew, that it was sitting in the library over at Paramount, who bought the entire library of Strange Universe. And so I called them I told them I wanted to license, that video for my documentary, and they wanted to charge me $15,000 for 30 seconds. And I said, I can't believe this. I said, you didn't even know you had it. I even gave them the tape number and everything. I said, it's sitting there collecting dust. You didn't know you had it. You wouldn't have it if it hadn't been for me buying it for you, so can't you give me a break? Anyway, they wouldn't budge. I ended up having my business partner from England call him up, and he negotiated it down to, I think we got to use just a few seconds. I want to say 3 seconds. So that's why you see it speeded up and slowed down, speeded up. And I think we ended up just paying a couple of $1,000 for that. But I was so angry because I thought, you didn't even know you had it, and then you're going to charge me like that? That's crazy.
Yeah. Well, then now it's supply and demand. Now that they knew that they had something that was reasonably or possibly valuable, suddenly they just throw a random figure at you like that. You're better off like taking it to the National Enquirer as
yeah,
somebody legitimate,
Yeah, but that was wild. But to me, it looked good. And then what impressed me was that the guy did not want anything for it. And he just wanted to wash his hands of it, And I think later on, he started feeling a little more comfortable about it. But he was like, he said people were laughing at him and all this stuff. So, but I hope he doesn't regret it too much. And I hope he saved a copy for his own viewing pleasure. But that's the best one I've seen, other than the Patterson video. And I'm not sure that I would say the Patterson one is better, although, in my memory right now, as I sit here, I can't remember, quite the clarity of the one that we used. But
Bob Gimlin's wife had the original.
Is he still alive?
I believe he is now.
And he still says it's authentic.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he is granted. I mean, it's rare. I mean, he's up there in years right now, but I know he's granted a couple of interviews. And I believe, he released the original so it could be forensically, checked out, eliminated, and everything like that. So a lot of times what we see as far as Patterson Gimlin has been altered in some way because they went so far as to stabilize the video, because as Patterson's chasing this thing, if you've seen the whole, whatever it is, 5-minute clip, I mean, the camera is just literally all over the place. And it's only when this creature is walking, and we've seen the iconic footage where, crossing the sandbar and looks back a couple of times, so forth. That's really the only steady shot of that whole thing that they've had. So to take it apart, they had to slow it down, stabilize it, and do some different things to it to make it so they could deal with it in terms of really taking it apart.
Yeah. Now, I don't know that I have seen the entire thing. I think I've just seen what's generally been put out within shows.
Right.
So there's probably a lot more to that footage that I haven't seen. But now we were talking about how, probably if they came across on foot, across the Bering Strait, and then naturally they would have come down around that way through the Pacific Northwest. And then, some of them might have, ended up breaking off, and there might be smaller populations or other populations that have started in other places. Have you heard anything at all about up in your area? You've got so much paranormal activity up there. I'd be surprised if somebody didn't have a Bigfoot around somewhere.
Yeah, that leads me to the story a few years ago. I guess it was back in 2007. I got contacted randomly by someone. I guess they had heard that I had gone out and done this stuff. So they did a blog about it. It was called The Loneliest Bigfoot Hunter in America. Because at that time, were only 2 states in the country that had not had a Bigfoot sighting. One was where I am in Rhode Island, and the other was Hawaii.
Oh, my gosh.
They asked me about, what is that like? Is it sort of like beating your head against the wall? And I mean, Rhode Island is a very, very small state, obviously. Yeah. We always joke you can get anywhere in 45 minutes,
Right.
You can cross the state. So I had told him a story that was told to me by a woman. Excuse me. And her story was that she was driving down a well-known road here in Rhode Island that has some other weird kind of tales attached to it. But this creature jumped out in front of her, forcing her to slam the brakes on. And it came closer to the car, and she was just absolutely terrified. She's trying to get the car in reverse, and she's screaming. And whatever this was, this hairy creature on 2 legs brought both fists down on the hood of her car and dented it badly, and then ran off. she couldn't get out of there fast enough. And when she got home and she told her husband about it and said, you have to come out and see this damage. She didn't even want to tell him what she saw. She told him that it must have happened at the mall.
Yeah, that's typical.
Yeah, so she told me this story, and this is many years after it happened. I think this was in the 80s that this happened to her. And, very credible. Unfortunately, I had asked for pictures. I said, well, when you sent this to your insurance company, I assume somebody took some pictures. And she said that they did, but she never did, because I guess she just wasn't thinking in those kind of terms. And in her words, she
probably wanted to forget about it.
Well, I was just going to say, in her words, she thinks, looking back, she was kind of trying to repress the whole memory of what was going on, because I wish she had some pictures. Not only that, but if I had been around and knew this woman at that time, I would have asked if the car was still there. Could I see it? I mean, is there a strand of hair on the grill?
Yeah, there might have been some touch DNA.
Anything like that. But of course, back in those days, nobody thought in those terms.
Right.
Systematically scientific.
We didn't have our video cameras, our phones.
She, at that point in her life, she just wanted out from under it, because she thought, and maybe rightfully so, that everybody would just think she was a crazy woman, but did not even tell her husband, told me. And I remember telling that story to this particular blogger at the time. Blogs were like a new thing back then. So this kind of got some minor national notoriety. And then I ended up getting people that, wanted me to direct them to where this happened and everything like that. And, I mean, we did check out the area. I mean, as far as Rhode Island, it's a very heavy wooded area, and that's about all I can say about it.
Yeah.
The Finding Bigfoot team came here a few years back based on a report of a creature here. So they came out, and recently we actually had Cliff Barackman on Dead Air on our YouTube show, and I asked him about that, and it was kind of an uneventful night that they spent out here. They thought they did hear some howls and things like that, but not enough to definitively claim we have a Bigfoot. In Rhode Island, we are known as Little Rhodey. That's our nickname for a state, but this particular creature has been nicknamed Big Rhodey.
Oh.
Whether Big Rhodey exists out here, the jury's still out on that.
Wow. Well, that's a great story. And it sounds, it has the ring of truth, because, again, she wasn't looking for anything. In fact, she was trying like heck to just put it behind her. We do have another question just before the break, which we're going to take in just a couple minutes, from Ronald at Art Radio. He says, do all Bigfoot creatures have hair?
I am not aware, Ronald. It's a great question. I am not aware of any that are hairless, unless there is something like mange or something like that.
Right.
Maybe attached to them, because they're just as susceptible to mites and viruses and, as we are through their metabolism. There are a lot of reports of longer hair, shorter hair, different color hair, things like that. Sometimes where you can't make out facial features, and other times people describe them as you would be looking at, your basic ape-like features. So
right. And others say it looks like a man,
Yeah, I mean, and you have to assume that if this is the case and they exist, then there has to be some element of DNA that we would share with them, just like we do gorillas or chimpanzees, orangutans, or any primate. But as I say, I am not aware of any, other than perhaps there's a a little bit more to the story. I mean, we see that in, coyotes, things like that, where they will look at it and say there's some strange creature, and they find out that, unfortunately, the animal, has, a very pronounced infection.
Mm-hmm. I would imagine they would be susceptible to different skin conditions, that might cause a hair loss, but, about the different colors, that you hear about the Yeti, over in the Himalayas, which of course the alternate name is the abominable snowman, and they're often depicted with white fur. And the Bigfoot creatures that I've seen, depicted in America, all are, brown fur, dark brown fur.
Right. Yeah.
Who knows?
You're looking at the environment, it's just like the snow leopard. Living in higher altitudes, they blend in with their surroundings. There have been Bigfoots who have known to change color based on season. And we see that in the animal world, because eventually what will happen in a high altitude, where it just gets just a little bit too intense to live down, up in those in the mountains, they have to go where the food source is, where there are still plants, and if they're omnivores, where they'll eat, whatever's available, small animals, deer, berries, fruit, plants, or whatever. Obviously, at certain times of the year, they have to come down into the altitudes where those things exist for them, which is the frustrating thing, because you would think that once they come down from those, godforsaken altitudes, that there would be, more pictures or more sightings. But right now, unfortunately, we're still stuck with a lot of, grainy videos and blurry cell phone shots and things of that nature, which is why when you get some clarity in those photos and videos, it's a real find. It's unusual, but those are the things that we have to really take a deeper dive into and examine.
Absolutely. Well, it's time for the break. When we come back, more with Ken DeCosta. Stay with us, please.
Folks, this is very important information. What's to be said about CBD? AncientLifeOil.com. Our CBD is made from hemp and has 0.003 THC, which means this wonderful product won't get you high, no matter what amount you take. What does CBD do for the body? My hands are tied, but you can Google CBD benefits and be astounded. When you're finished reading, you'll want to log on to AncientLifeOil.com. That's AncientLifeOil.com. and purchase. Life is good when you feel good. People are tired of pain. People are asking for non-GMO organic products to help them with you fill in the blank. Legal in 49 states, and again, our CBD is made from hemp. Ancient Life Oil is about helping people one by one by one. If you wonder how good the product is, the CEO takes it every day without miss. AncientLifeOil.com. That's AncientLifeOil.com. Have a great day.
Permanent industrial glue impossible to remove? Not anymore, because Handyman Formula by D-Bond is a patented chemical adhesive remover. It's used in the building and home maintenance industry, but now it's available for your home use, for your DIY projects. Unglue stickers, silicone rubber, labels, price tags, flex tape, weather stripping, carpet glue, wood glue, liquid nails, even 3M 5200. And it dissolves graffiti. Yeah, graffiti. Handyman Formula by D-Bond works, and it's safe to use on most surfaces. No need to call a professional. Don't get out the pliers and blowtorch. Just apply a little Handyman Formula by D-Bond and wait 90 seconds, then quickly and easily pull the items apart. Get unstuck. Visit DBondHandymanFormula.com. That's DBondHandymanFormula.com, or call 561-575-4200. Handyman Formula by D-Bond.
Welcome to the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, thekgradb.com. Here you'll find great new content, including the KGRA Classics, great shows from our archives. You'll be able to see the show times and information so you can see what show is currently on air. The on-air live button. So just go to this section and you'll be able to hear the show live with exceptional sound quality. We also have the Vault section. Make sure to subscribe to get access to great content and special features. We have the make content for our latest news and events, so make sure to sign up and you can be part of our forum. So make sure to check out the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, the KGRADB.com. We look forward to seeing you there, and we hope that you enjoy the new website.
Hey members, the new KGRA DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA DB.
We are the contact for alternative research topics. KGRADB.com.
Welcome back to Night Vision. I'm your host, Renee Barnett. With me tonight is Ken DeCosta of the Rise Up Paranormal Investigative Team and the YouTube channel, The Paranormal Channel. Be sure and check him out because he's got loads of good stuff on there, some great podcasts, and some stories about his own paranormal investigations. We're getting into the history of Bigfoot and answering questions from the chat room. So please send us your questions. And also, I'd love to hear if you've had a sighting. You don't have to write a novel. You can just write a couple of lines and say where you had your sighting. I'd be interested to know different areas of the country that have had sightings that you know about or that you have had personally. But yes, Oh, and those of you that are listening, the chat room is located in Discord. So just go on the Discord app, look for KGRA, and you'll be live inside our chat room as we chat to you over the airwaves. So anyway, Ken, we were talking about how there seems to be, like other strange occurrences popping up in areas and around Bigfoot sightings. I know there was a point where I was going to do a sort of sequel to the documentary, and I was going to call it Return to Bigfootville, and was actually researching it. Then, I had a personal tragedy, took a different course and all that stuff. So, but I was really interested to see, because I had seen that there was a newspaper article in Tahlequah, Oklahoma, which is the capital of the Cherokee Nation there as well. And that there had been a Bigfoot sighting, and there was actually a photograph in the newspaper of what looked like a Bigfoot standing like in a creek bed. And so I contacted the reporter who was writing the story, and I was asking him, he said, oh yeah, there's a lot of sightings around this area. And he said, there's a lot of really weird things that happen. And he said, sometimes it's like it seems like the energy or the atmosphere changes. And he says, we just call them Tahlequah days. You're saying, oh, it's another Tahlequah day. And he said, and very strange, coincidences will happen. Somebody will pop into your head and then they'll knock on the door. Weird sightings in the sky, Bigfoot sightings. And he said that there was this one area there where they had a lot of Bigfoot sightings. And it was up on this place called Sparrowhawk Mountain. And coincidentally, they also have a lot of UFO sightings up there. And it's a strange place that is purported to have, like a really special kind of high energy thing going on. And this lady, like, maybe 30, 40 years ago, was flying over and with her husband. I guess they had a little private plane. And when they got over that spot, she said, "Oh, this is where I want to be." And she built a spiritual retreat up there, right in the middle of, the Bible Belt, which is just, unheard of, because, they had all these, metaphysical ideas and stuff. And supposedly a lot of things were going on up there, including Bigfoot sightings. Why do you think that would be the case?
Well, I think that what we're alluding to is something that a lot of people are embracing now. It's called the unified paranormal theory. And it starts getting into things like quantum entanglement, magnetic field, interdimensions, things like that. Because that's that's a show unto itself. But I kind of look at it this way: as far as quantum entanglement, magnetic fields, and some say they're also involved with magical powers, and that our ancestors recognized this. Maybe they were more attuned to this thing, where we live in an age now of microwaves and all sorts of things bombarding us, and images on 24/7 news cycles. We kind of become a little bit desensitized in our world to that. But if you really take it apart, you'll find that many, many years ago, they created architecture in certain areas and got involved in some, I guess you'd call it, supernatural practices, and tried to involve themselves more into the world than we do now, and just kind of listen to it a little bit. Because you'll find, and we've all heard of ley lines, and there are magnetic lines. They're on a grid throughout our Earth. And a lot of times, certain structures like obelisks, something with to do with some type of triangular shape, because this goes back to the days of Egyptians as far as the pyramids. Any kind of pyramid would draw energy. So a lot of times you'll see these type of obelisks or some type of architecture that are built on these ley lines, and it's amazing to me when they a lot of times they would build cemeteries or churches, places of worship.
Yes.
On these ley lines. And in fact, the city of Seattle actually did a study where they were going to start building on ley lines because they are detectable. It's the natural DC current, which is the Earth's natural magnetic field. AC being, man-made. So the theory of all of this really comes down to the idea where people are starting to pay more attention to correlations, where there's a sighting of a ghost, a sighting of a Bigfoot, a sighting of a UFO. And now that people are starting to pay attention, a lot of these events tend to coincide with each other. There's a big thing now with orange orbs, that people are seeing and witnessing orange orbs at the time of a Bigfoot sighting. So now people start to theorize, is the Bigfoot an alien? Are they an alien species? Are they basically just doing a lot of the heavy lifting and the work for aliens? Or are they just so interesting that an alien culture has decided to study them? So, I mean, we do love our theories in the paranormal field when we can't figure things out, because that's how the human mind is wired. We like to explain things, even if ultimately the explanation is there's no explanation, then it's therefore paranormal, and we wipe our hands and say that, aha, we figured it out. But there is more of a movement right now to somehow correlate these things, whether or not ghosts could be part of a sort of alien agenda, or it's part of this quantum entanglement.
Mm.
People who right now,
it almost feels right that it's like somehow interdimensional, and that when you see these things, it's like you're kind of crossing, or they're crossing, or you're crossing, dimensions are somehow coming together. So you might see all kinds of different things because it's a different dimension. So
yeah, there's two schools of thought on this. There's like what I feel like, because that's the thing, where are the bodies, right? That's the number one question. Where are the bodies? I mean, any hunter will tell you that it's next to impossible to find a carcass of an apex predator, whether that's a mountain lion, a bear, unless they have been killed. Because animals will tend to, when they get old or infirm or sick, they will go off by themselves, and they will go as far away from any other animal as possible because they're in a vulnerable state. And instinctively, they know they're vulnerable, and they are vulnerable to predators who normally would not be any threat to them. So they go off. A deer carcass can be reclaimed by the earth in 2 weeks because they live in a wet environment. There's a lot of bacteria. The earth reclaims things. There's predators. So that's the natural explanation as to why you don't find these large creatures in bodies. And hunters, people who spend a lot of time in the woods, will tell you those things. But now there's a theory that maybe if it's interdimensional and they come through, I hate to use the P word, portals, that's why we don't have the bodies, because it's almost like a kind of, I'm not trying to be a wise ass, but, this kind of beam me up Scotty thing.
My God, that was just what went through my mind just before you said it. It's like they got beamed up. It's like, beam me up Scotty. It's true. And, to sort of support that supernatural aspect, I spent a lot of time down in, that area that we were tramping through the woods and meeting with people, talking with people. And we really were privileged to be able to spend some time with a wonderful, genuine Seminole Indian medicine man who was very powerful and known somehow around the world. I mean, people would try to see him from Germany and places like that. It was crazy. But we had one of the guys in our film, Tim Harjo, who's Seminole, was studying under this medicine man, Kennedy Wise Tallahassee, God rest his soul. He left us a couple years back. But first of all, they had several names, for it. Some of them kind of funny, like Hatak Ishtu, which was the man with big toes. Hatak Showy, the stinking man. And there was one that was called, and they almost say it like with a reverence, Ihoza, and that means makes you forget. And he said, you will see him, but you won't remember. So I guess I could have had a sighting, and maybe I just don't remember. But that was, and then he also said that, they were able to make themselves invisible. So that again sort of sounds a little interdimensional, like maybe they slip in and out,
If you look at the common factors, and this is why we've talked about this on our show at some length, if you look at the common denominators, whether it's ghosts, aliens, or Bigfoot, the commonalities they seem to vanish. They're there and they're not. Whether it's a ghost, spacecraft, alien, I turned around, it's gone. Nowhere to be found. Very fast-moving objects, where it's a Bigfoot flying through the woods at an amazing speed for any planet, or a ghost just passing, vanishing, UFOs at these incredible speeds. And the other thing is strange lights. strange lights seem to be associated with all three of those phenomena. So there's
now, strange lights. Are you talking like the Joplin spook lights or the Marfa lights, or?
No, those can probably be explained by natural phenomena.
Yeah.
I am talking about an actual light anomaly, because I've seen the difference, and I'm obviously not talking about dust and bugs and moisture in pictures.
And you're not talking about a UFO.
Strange lights are part of the UFO phenomena.
Yeah.
Lights are also part of the ghost phenomena. They're part of the Bigfoot phenomena. It seems more and more and more that there are reports of those kind of correlations, which is why when people in the know who are doing this have a Bigfoot sighting now, they are immediately looking to the sky because they're getting kind of hip to this now. I wonder if there's something else going on. And this is why these strange orange lights that people report, people who are really deeply into this now and who are studying this don't necessarily keep their eyes on a flat plane anymore. When they see a sighting, they're looking at their entire surroundings. And a lot of them are finding that there are other things going on. I mean, we tend to look at the phenomena that's right in front of us. We focus on it, of course. But people are starting to take pictures and videos of everything now in a 360-degree panorama. It's just kind of like UFOs are seen over volcanoes and things like that.
Right.
Paying attention more to the entire surroundings rather than focusing in one particular spot.
Yes, absolutely. I know there was a book out. I mean, I'm sure there are many of them now, but I'm trying to remember if it was Peter Byrne. It was definitely one of the, old time Bigfoot researchers who put out a book on Bigfoot and UFOs and like a Bigfoot and UFO connection. And I remember that was sort of the first I heard people talking about that. And that was back in like maybe 1996, the mid 90s. And I remember people just was like, oh my gosh, that's ridiculous. Oh Lord, Bigfoot and UFOs, that's crazy. But then in the ensuing decades, you keep hearing reports. So it seems like, that he was onto something for sure way back then.
Yeah, one of the guys who did something like that a while back was a guy named John Keel.
Yes.
And he was investigating Mothman phenomena, where he posited things like interdimensional beings and alien presence to explain this, but yet people still put this in a category of cryptids because, it seems to be an animal. It's uncatalogued, it's undocumented, so we tend to put it into the cryptozoological list because that's what we love to do. We love to categorize things and label things. But John Keel posited that this was something a little bit more than that. And of course, he in the beginning was sort of like a lot of people do have a vision. A lot of people thought he was a crank. And then as time went on and these things became more prominent, the work of these people tend to get revisited. Well, let's go take another look at this. And then suddenly people see it in a different light.
Yeah, I think it's like the, sort of a knee-jerk reaction when you hear something really wild to just sort of almost reject it out of hand immediately, and then unless you've been steeped in this kind of stuff yourself and you're used to hearing, strange happenings. But, I'm talking about, just the general public. I think it's, the first reaction is to just say, oh, that's just crazy, and then later research evolves, science evolves, and the phenomenon evolves to a point where it's like, oh, okay, there is something about this. Maybe we better go back and check out what this crazy guy was saying all those years ago that we just dismissed. But I think that happens a lot. And I know there's a lot of things, like even with my historical research and things, a lot of things that I read, back in the 80s and the 90s, it's like I go back and I read them now and they have so much more meaning and such a different meaning because I've learned things since then that I didn't know, and I can now go back and apply what they're saying to what I know. And it makes a world of difference. So, yeah, I would encourage people to go back to the pioneers of all these subjects and see what they were saying way back when and compare it to things that, are almost common to us now.
Yeah, I mean, I am willing to, because honestly, I'm not going to say that I embrace all of this because I like to think of myself as a more pragmatic type of guy. I like to think of myself more as a researcher. And this is why I hate terms like ghost hunter and so like, what are we hunting? Not hunting anything, But nonetheless, I want to hear what other people have to say because in lieu of a better explanation, because I haven't figured out what ghosts are. I mean, I've had some personal experiences that to this day have changed me. When you have a legitimate one, it sort of changes your life. But in terms of looking into these things, I don't think it's hurting anybody to at least take a dive into it, where we start talking about things like quantum entanglement and things like that. And I understand it's not for everybody. Nobody wants to sit there and read quantum theory or anything like that. I can understand that. But I'm not trying to suggest that, Bigfoot has control over UFOs or something like that. There are just some correlations that are, I think, interesting, or at least deserve a little bit of our attention anyway, in lieu of anything else. I mean, there are people now, there's people who are thinking now after all of these things, and, whether it's the abduction phenomena that, people have said that Bigfoot communicates to them without speaking. Well, they also say the same thing about aliens, and they say the same thing about ghosts. Like, a voice is coming to me, it's telling me something, but I don't hear any lips moving. So a lot of these paranormal events, it's posited that they may be specifically designed for the individual who's the experiencer on this, maybe for a higher level of consciousness, enlightenment, whatever the case may be, but they're targeted specifically for you, whether it's the induction phenomena, seeing a ghost, seeing the spacecraft, whatever. That's why when you have more than one person experience the same thing, those are the really compelling things.
Yeah, because sometimes, as you well know, there can be something that someone sees standing right there or up in the sky, and nobody sees it but them. I mean, going back to, the old days, when people would have, sightings of Mother Mary and, like the little children in France at Lourdes, and they would, look up into the sky and they would just be transfixed, and just have this ecstatic look on their faces, and everybody else was looking around and they couldn't see anything. But yet it seemed that those kids, were definitely having their own experience. And certainly if there's, if there are things, and we know that there are, such as, other dimensions, parallel universes and things like that, I think there's a pretty good case to be made that those things are real and has been made, that, they must be able to sort of target, if they're that advanced or that part of life or whatever that is, there seems to be a lot more, or maybe just different abilities and and phenomena than what we are able to do on this end.
See, I'm glad you mentioned being more advanced, because there's a couple of things. There's a fine line to walk here. Someone may be looking up into the sky and seeing an astronomical anomaly, or whether it's the northern. I mean, what were people thinking the first time they saw the northern lights?
Right.
When we weren't as enlightened, people thought thunder was the gods being angry at one point because we didn't know. And it's no one's fault. We just didn't know. We evolved. We gained more knowledge. So a lot of those things may be able to be explained now, years later, in retrospect. But at the same token, we can't ever get so arrogant where we think that we figured things out. And I'll give you a classic example. The ghost story that happened in 1887 or something like that, or a UFO sighting that was written in, the 16th century. Now, you might say, okay, they saw, ball lightning or something like that, and you'd have a good point. But we think we're so much smarter now, and we see something happen in the 1700s, the 1800s, and now, I mean, the 1900s doesn't sound like it's that far away, but, we're way over 100 years now. And we tend to dismiss those things by saying, well, what did they know? They weren't as smart as us. They didn't know what we do. And that's fine. You should evolve, but it doesn't mean that we should just dismiss them out of hand either, because there are still some pretty compelling stories from 100 or 200 years ago.
Well, and also, certainly with UFOs, there are old paintings, that are out there, that depict, clearly like a flying saucer going across, the sky. There's one, painting I'm thinking of that I believe has Mother Mary and the baby Jesus, and in the background you can see this UFO. And another one, there's a group of shepherds and there's a UFO above them, and they're like looking, it's like a beam coming down. Very old painting. I mean, if they were talented artists and they were able to depict what else they saw, so why wouldn't they be able to depict what they saw in the sky? So I'm taking them at their word that that's what they were looking at.
Yeah, I mean, and I know exactly those paintings you're talking about. The only thing that I might counter that with was that a lot of those artists, those things in the sky, were meant to be representations of something else, and not necessarily UFOs or something like that, but they may have done something like that to attribute it to something else.
Right.
So in other words, that was almost like an impressionistic type of thing, where, so, I mean, because I've looked into those, we all watch, Ancient Aliens and all the rest of that stuff. So it really comes down to, it's like, well, that's good. Let me find out what it is. Mm-hmm. When you find out what it is and other pieces of that particular artist's work, you'll see that a lot of times it's very impressionistic, and those things are meant to represent something else and not necessarily like, I saw something flying across, so I'm going to paint it right now. So again, it's kind of a slippery slope.
There was certainly a lot of symbolism, even, hidden messages embedded in paintings, particularly during the Renaissance period. There's all kinds of, geometrical formulas and, little objects that are in the painting that, carry certain meanings for the initiated, or for those who know, or for those who have eyes to see. So you're right. They could be just doing something symbolic. Now, I have another question from Eric in the chat room, and he says, Ken says he doesn't know what ghosts are, but doesn't he think they are just us who have died? That's another complicated question.
Uh, Boy, when we start getting into the idea of ghosts, there are two things that I kind of embrace. I'm gonna die on this hill. I think there are spirits, and here's the difference. I think ghosts are just residual things, imprints in the psychic ether of events that have happened in the past. And they don't acknowledge us. They don't make eye contact with us or anything like that. Spirits, on the other hand, I think have something that ghosts don't, and that's free will. They may be able to come and go as they please. They may come in visitation. They retain a certain consciousness.
An awareness of, because it seems like the other isn't even aware. Like
right.
If you're in a room, they don't see you. They don't acknowledge you, like you said.
So you're tapping into a prior event. You're not having any kind of acknowledgement or anything like that. And in one case, in the case of a spirit, and listen, we're just throwing words out here, ghost, spirit. It's whatever you want it to be, but they retain characteristics of the personality that they had when they were alive. So, I mean, it's a controversial thing, but in the years that I've spent doing this and trying to all figure out what's the difference, that's the closest thing I can come up to. I don't necessarily dismiss the fact that it's part of the human condition to see these things, to see ghosts and things like that. It may be, for lack of a better term, all in our heads. Although, I mean, I have seen things myself. I have to admit, I have seen what you would call an apparition. I've experienced it. It's life-changing. It's weird. Now, is it a ghost? Is it somebody who lived and died there? Or is it my own brain functions? Because to me, honestly, Renee, if we find out at the end of the day, this is all part of the human condition, and we experience these things, and it's part of our brainwave patterns and just how the human mind works, I don't find that any less fascinating, to be honest with you.
Well, yeah. I mean, like you said earlier on, I don't remember if we were on the air or not. I don't think so. But you said it's not necessarily finding something. It's the journey, because you're learning all the time. You're gathering more information. It's causing you to think critically. And so it's all good, and the journey is the fun of it. And, once you find out, maybe it's not so fun anymore. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's wrong or a waste of time to ask questions they've been asking for millennia. Where do we go after it's all over here? Some people say, that's it.
That's
the eyes.
The big question.
And there's nothing but, I mean, listen, we're not the first people to ask that question.
No, that is the question. The age-old question. But, what you were talking about, residual energy, I was just watching a little YouTube video or something about a haunted church somewhere. I don't remember where it was. But this young priest had, started working there in this parish. And he saw this woman, sitting in the pew. And he went to say something to her, and she got up and, walked away, and then she just faded out, And then he kept seeing her doing exactly the same thing and never acknowledging him, and it's almost like, to me, it reminds me of like a hologram that's just playing over and over, that it is like there was some high energy that occurred maybe, because she's there. It looks like she's mourning someone. And, maybe there was something so heavy duty that happened that it caused that energetic imprint there that just keeps replaying. It's like in a loop.
Yeah. Well, that's and that's the question, isn't it? Because quantum theorists will tell you that once you have a fully formed thought, it becomes a physical thing. It's out there. It's out there in the ether somewhere. So seeing as how we're only using about 15% of our brains, maybe in the right place at the right time, we tap into those things. It's kind of like time slips, where you're walking down a busy street and all of a sudden you see a horse and buggy coming at you, and people dressed 19th century clothing, and then it's gone. I mean, those are fascinating things, and those happen to people. They're not ghost hunting. They're not investigating. They're just going about their lives. They maybe don't even believe in the things that we do, or they have no interest in them, but suddenly they have this profound event happen to them, and that's when I get an email or a phone call, and usually it starts with, "You're going to think I'm crazy, but," to which I respond, it's like, "Hey, I investigate these things. Who am I to think you're crazy?"
Exactly.
I'm just as nuts.
Who wants to be sane? Who wants to be normal? It's like you don't discover anything new if you're just normal all the time.
When people who aren't believers, or they could care less, they're just living their lives, when they have these type of experiences, they're not asking for it. They're not looking for it. So
yes.
We spend enough time on such minutia because we want to believe in certain things that we tend to overlook the smaller percentage of things that are unexplainable. And we don't focus on those because we just seem to want to prove something. And there are certain instances and cases and events that happen that really warrant our scrutiny, instead of thinking, everything's an alien. Every stump in the woods could be a Bigfoot, or, every knock in the house could be a ghost, and things like that. So that's what, if we were going to move forward on this and actually get science involved, that would be the thing. Because you know how it is, Renee, going back to Bigfoot, one hoax can undo 100 pieces of great evidence.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's like saying there are no brown cows until you see a brown cow.
Yep.
So that's what happens when people like Rick Dyer, I won't go into him, but, to your audience, Google him. When people like that come along, unfortunately, every time somebody takes a video, people are going to say, it's a guy in a suit. It's just human nature. So, if we could just focus on the things that are really compelling that we can explain, and, start to get people involved in those, we'd be a lot better off.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that we're sort of on the precipice of some scientific, breakthroughs, I guess, or at least when it comes to, getting scientists interested. I feel like there's more of that as, the possibility, of parallel universes is accepted and things like that, that I think there are people that are more willing now, that would have maybe shied away from these subject matters as too fringe, for academia and, for science. But I mean, if things are happening and people are reporting them, people are seeing them, some things are getting captured on video or photographs or on recordings. There's been some very interesting EVPs and things and other things that have been caught on audio. I mean, why wouldn't, the scientific community be interested in seeing what that is? I mean, and I think it's they're moving in that direction. Not fast enough, but
no, I think. But there's two things they like: tenure and grant money.
Yes,
and acknowledgement or acceptance from their peers. And for the same reason that if someone calls me that has a family, they have kids, and we just say, "Yes, I'll pay you a visit. We'll sit down. We'll try to work this out." I don't let anybody know I'm there, because they don't want to be teased. They don't want their kids to be teased, whatever the case may be. People don't want to be ostracized. Scientific community is no different.
Yes.
Oh, there are people, there are scientists, there are physicists now, more and more, like you say, they're stepping up, they're going on the record. And if nothing else, it's a sort of begrudging acknowledgement to, well, there might be something more than this. But I don't think they're ready to dive into the deep end yet because of the same reason. You know, they still want to be regarded by their peers as somebody who's got their stuff together. So we got to fight our way kind of through that.
Yeah. I mean, you know, unfortunately, it's that way in every field. You know, archaeology is exactly the same way. You know, some new theory, some new discovery is always looked on with so much skepticism and, you know, just to the point of, you know, dismissing it out of hand before they even look at it. They don't want to be seen to be looking at it, you know, because what if they, you know, what if they look foolish later or something like that? So it goes across the board, and that's pretty hard, you know, because it's hard to get them involved that way. But in a way, once you do, it certainly does, you know, start giving it more legitimacy in the eyes of the world. That's for sure. And you might find out some more stuff because they've got all the good fancy tech and everything and the knowledge.
It's why, you know, I scratch my head sometimes. There's this big thing where for what we're trying to do, you've got to use the scientific method, you know, hypothesis theory, repeatable laboratory experiments. And it's a fool's errand because what we do isn't repeatable. We're not doing this in a laboratory. I mean, an archaeologist will tell you that, you know, the earth is their laboratory and the earth is a volatile place. You know, you could be doing a dig and then it, you know, it rains for 10 days, the winds pick up. So it's kind of like what we're doing too. If we are to assume that what we're chasing here is, you know, it's so volatile, it changes. And I don't care the three things we're talking about, whether it's cryptids, whether it's UFOs, whether it's ghosts. Ghosts, for example, if what we're talking about is us, human beings are very volatile creatures. I mean, we have good days, bad days, we have mood swings. So it's difficult to say it's like, okay, we're going to do something repeatable here, you know, in a laboratory setting. I don't know how you even go about doing that, but it's kind of the way they sort of put us down a little bit.
Right.
Like I should be able to repeat the same steps and get the same results. Well, you're dealing with, you know, emotions and, like I said, a lot of intangible things and volatility. And it's not like mix 10 cc's of this and 10 cc's of that and get your measurements right. And then here's your, no, it's just not what we do. So, I mean, why even, to me, I was like, I don't even bother with that anymore.
Well, you know, it's like with, you know, if we're talking about, you know, residual energy, that's one thing. If we're talking about spirits of people who've passed over, then we're talking about people. And you can't ever know who's going to show up, or, you know, you can't direct the spirit world, you know, on what to do. So, yeah, it's, you know, not repeatable. Every experience is going to be different. Yeah. Every time.
Exactly. Because if I walk into Bluff Creek, where Patterson Gimlin filmed this Bigfoot, and I sat there for a month, if I sat there for a year, you know, I should be able to experience, you know, maybe she's not around, but maybe one of her kin are, you know.
Yeah.
I should be able to experience the same thing. And that's not going to happen. But unfortunately, that gets used against us. It's like, you know, eureka, aha, see, they don't exist. In that particular moment and time, something exists in the physical realm. You might say it's a guy in a suit. Somebody might say it's a primate. But whatever it was, it existed in the physical realm in that particular time, and it's been documented. So to ask if it's going to be repeatable, all I can tell you is Northern California remains a hotbed of Bigfoot sightings and things like that. Places like Mount St. Helens, Sedona, Arizona, where Sedona, Arizona is the
Sedona,
because everything happens. Everything we talked about happens.
Yeah.
with AIDS.
It's true, but I did not know about Bigfoot there. That is wild.
Oh, yeah.
That's wild. And, we were talking about, ghosts, spirits. Are they people? Are they just energy? I mean, I wonder if some of it, could the Bigfoots, have a ghost once they die? Could, some of the Bigfoot sightings be residual energy of Bigfoots that have been there in the past? I did. I remember one guy who was a football coach or a track coach, I guess, down in Broken Bow, Oklahoma, who had this major sighting. He was out hunting in the woods by himself, and he was, he had his rifle and he was kind of behind this blind or something. I don't know what he was hunting for, maybe deer. And he said he turned around and he was face to face with this Bigfoot. And he said, he was looking right in my eyes. And he said, and I could have shot him. He said, but he could have killed me before I turned around, and he didn't. And he said, and I said, well, tell me, when you were looking at his eyes, into his eyes, were you looking at an animal or were you looking at a person? And he said, I was looking at a person.
There you go.
And I just went, whoa.
Well, you know what? There's like choice because, something else that's been said that, I take I think has some merit is that tens of thousands of years ago, when we started to branch off Neanderthal, Cro-Magnon, et cetera, and so forth, and, we started to sort of evolve, that there was a kind of fracture in that, where species of a certain development may have been more social, and another faction may have been much more isolated.
Mm-hmm.
So one ended up building cities and communities, and the others went and lived in the woods. So is it conceivable that these are the spawn of that particular part of our evolution who just decided to go off by themselves? And that's the environment that they live in.
Mm.
And how the evolutionary process kind of frozen
Right.
a little bit. I don't know. I guess I'm going to be like a person in chat right now and just kind of throw that idea out there in terms of what is it that people are seeing? Is it just possible in our evolutionary chain we sort of broke off in two different paths? And, one evolved and developed, and another just decided, you know what, I'm going off the grid. And that's who they are.
Yeah, the medicine man Kennedy Wise said, they're another tribe. He said, we don't bother them and they don't bother us. Like, wow, that's a trip. But then again, I also talked with people. I remember there was a nurse at the hospital in Ada, Oklahoma, and she was Native American, and she said that, they lived in the woods when she was a little kid, and she said, we used to play with the little ones. And she was not a nut. She was a professional registered nurse taking care of patients in a hospital, and, a perfectly reasonable woman. And she said it as though, oh yeah, we played with the kids next door. It was like that. And I was like, wow, that's really wild.
Sure.
So I think in some cases, maybe there has been some times when they felt safe enough to approach, or maybe the little ones are a little bit more adventuresome. And then, the parents grab them back and say, get back in the cave, get back in the woods. But it's a very, very interesting thing. And it's fun to try to figure it out, even though we may never. But it certainly does seem like there is, at least from what we can see in our limited scope, there does seem to be a supernatural or a paranormal kind of element to Bigfoot that, I think wasn't really appreciated, when Bigfoot, sort of first burst out on the scene with the Patterson video.
Right. One of the things when I'm asked to talk about these things, whether it's like I say at a conference, a Comic-Con or something like that, the way I always like to end this is like, if nothing else, it's like, so what's the function of Bigfoot? What's his place in the world, or the Loch Ness Monster, or any other cryptid? And I look at it, it serves the purpose because as long as we ask questions, it gets us away from our comfort zone. It takes us away from technology. It gets us out in nature. It gets us out in the world. It gets us out in the woods. So if nothing else, we kind of get a chance to commune again with the world, with the natural world. So you know what? If nothing else, and that's the purpose, that the search for Bigfoot, it goes on and on and on. Honestly, I think it does serve a kind of a noble purpose. So the people that are looking for it, stay safe. Don't do anything crazy. My goodness. Don't be rappelling down any mountains. At least I won't. But I think
look out for bears.
Look out.
Sometimes there's bears in the woods. Bears
are tough. But I think that's the purpose it might serve in the grander scheme of things, is that we get back to nature a little bit.
And that's a wonderful thing. Beautiful thing. Yeah, I spent some time out in the woods, trekking around in December in Oklahoma. I think it was about 20. And we would sit around a little campfire in the middle of the woods, and some of us would go off on little, journeys to look around. It was the craziest thing, but it was really interesting. We had, a couple of cops with us that had an up-close experience with a Bigfoot, which one of them, it just blew his mind. He was having a lot of issues, trying to deal with it. And I think the other one was too, really. In fact, I went on Coast to Coast with them because I had them on Strange Universe as well. And I went on Coast to Coast with Art Bell, and that's how long ago it was. And had the two cops, really, really interesting story and everything. And then later, the one officer ended up getting in a lot of trouble. He went on drugs, and then he got killed in a car accident. And so I always wondered whether, not being able to reconcile that experience had anything to do, with why he ended up, taking drugs or something.
Right.
But I don't know about the other officer. I'm sure he's fine, but I know he had a lot of problems, and he did not want to go back out there. But he did. He came back out, and but it was quite a story, because it's like those are the first times talking to people down in that area. It was the first time I really talked to that many people about Bigfoot and their experiences, but that I ran into so many people that actually had up close, not just from their car or, from far away, like they ended up somehow face to face. And, it was so interesting. I'd love to have that experience myself. Maybe one day we'll have to go out Bigfoot hunting, Ken.
I think so, right?
At least maybe we'll go out there and let them hunt us. How about that? They'd probably have better luck finding us.
Maybe a nice flat open field at this point,
We'll just go stand in the field. Oh goodness. Well, it has been so wonderful, to have you on. I so appreciate you doing this, and I've just had a great time. I know everybody can tell I've, just been having fun tonight. But once again, tell us again, how can we get your show and where can people find you?
Sure. YouTube. Everybody knows what YouTube is. Our channel is called the Paranormal Channel, and our show is called Dead Air. And it airs on Monday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern to 9:30. We have a lot of guests that we come on, just as like we're doing tonight. We had people like Nick Groff come on, and we have people from the cryptid community, the UFO community, the ghost community. So it's an open forum for anybody to share our views, or their views. And again, that's called Dead Air on Monday nights on YouTube on the Paranormal Channel. And we just started our first endeavor into original programming. It's called Paranormal Reveal. And that plays on Wednesdays at 8 p.m. And what that is we bring people on who have captured photographic, video, or audio evidence, and we play that evidence and let them tell the story in their own words, as far as taking us back to how they felt and how they feel about the evidence. And we let the viewer decide. So we just present it. But there's a lot of great things going on that channel. And please give us do the whole thing. Subscribe, notification bell, all the rest of that. But if you want to check us out, there's an archive of our shows there. And just a plug for what I think is one of the best paranormal groups going. That's Rise Up Paranormal. I've been blessed with some great people in this group from a lot of different walks of life, medical professions, teachers, Defense Department, all sorts of people are involved with us right now. So riseupparanormal.com. And
okay, everybody. The Paranormal Channel, go subscribe and check it out. It's not just his show on there. There's a lot of different things on there. So you might see some really interesting clips and other things. So check it out. We got to go. I love you all. And Ken, thank you, my friend, for coming on. I certainly appreciate it.
Oh,
it's been fun.
Anytime.
Take care, everybody.